Alright, this video is how to set up a remote switch to switch the fuel and injection and ignition maps on your Greddy EMU. And in this use case, it was done to facilitate running E85 on my truck without having to have like a standalone and flex fuel sensor. Obviously not as fancy. You can't have all these different blends by filling like half a tank with this and that like a standalone can do with a sensor and a blending feature. But I just run my tank down to almost empty, and I basically have the ability to switch between 91 octane and E85. Granted, if you have the supporting mods. In this case, I increased my injector, my primary injector CC flow rate, and you should have a better fuel pump as well, like a DW 200 or maybe even a 300 to keep up with the fuel flow. In this case, the 200 is more than enough. And so here's the Gen 2 supercharger, non-intercooled and not as efficient as the Gen 3, so it makes a lot of heat. And so here's the 50 Motorsports 650cc injectors that use air assist bodies, just like the OEM brown injectors. These are blue, so I'm assuming they took like maybe IS300 injectors, modified them to flow more. That's my water meth tank, not needed for E85. HKSDLI also probably not needed for E85. The stock coils are pretty strong. And so here's the front of the Greddy panel, and you can see that dip switch with the off and on selection, 1, 2, 3, 4 right there, and on, you put the switch down for on, and I believe what that's doing is that's closing those pins to that common ground. So on the right side, that's a ground plane on the PCB, and then across from that really large trace from this ground plane I'm showing right there, those pins to the left of the large trace is we'll just call that 1, 2, 3, and 4, like what the front panel shows. But I'm going to group that in 1, 2 to A and 3 and 4 to B, because I'm grouping ignition and injection maps 1 and 2 to give me what I want. So in this case, you can see on this DPDT rocker switch, I'm combining the middle pins to the ground plane on the PCB is how I'm making that extension harness. So I'm bridging those two pins to one wire to go to just one of those ground. Any one of those pins on the ground plane is good enough on that PCB, and then those top pins would go to 3 and 4, and I just grouped up as B. In software, you'll see how we select that, and the bottom pins are A for pins 1 and 2. So inside the parameter settings, you want injection and ignition maps 2 to have the same values as map 1. Don't leave that blank. And then on the front panel, you'll see how you can select what those dip switches do. In this case, again, I'm grouping it up so that maps 1 and maps 2, plural, are for 91 octane and E85. And here's what's not to do. Don't leave map 2 blank on ignition and fuel, or you have no maps at all when you do the switch. Ask me how I know. So yeah, make sure you do that in the software settings. And so here's the rocker switch installed with the extension harness going to the EMU and the kick panel. Right now it's on B, which is E85 for me, and then I can just switch over to 91 octane. That's how I turn water meth off. I don't want to run water meth on E85, and that's my SC bypass mod. I'll make another video on that later. So here inside the EMU software, I have injections map 1 and 2 open, and ignitions map 1 and 2 open. And again, I'm grouping up one and the 1s and the 2s for 91 octane and E85 respectively. And I have the highlighting feature in the EMU setup that shows you a highlighted cell for the load you're in, and I'm actively switching that switch with the ECU powered on. So you can do this on the fly, going back and forth between 91 octane, see that timing retard, and the 91 octane, and hardly any fuel added, and then switching over to E85, which is B. Now those other maps are in play with added fuel and added ignition timing. And so that's one of the advantages of the Greddy EMU, and why I switched over from the FIC to the EMU, from the AEM FIC to the EMU, is you can actually advance ignition timing, which really helps with E85. And then also, I was finding I was having ping when the automatic transmission would shift, and the Greddy EMU has an automatic shift timing retard feature, so you can even pull additional timing when the factory transmission is shifting. For some reason, the factory ECU advances timing while the transmission shifts. I think it's to make it just feel smoother overall. And so I'm able to dial that out as well with the eManage. And another bonus is E85 is about half the cost of 91 octane where I live. So this is just saving me money, about $30 a tank. Even though you get less MPGs with the 85, it's really negligible considering how extreme the cost delta is now. Currently in filming July 2025. So hope this was useful for anyone on wanting to modify their EMU to be able to switch maps remotely with a rocker switch. And please subscribe if you want to see how I do the supercharger bypass. Here's a IS300 I'm doing some shenanigans with, and we'll be loading content how to make an EMU to do all these things. And thanks for the watch. Have a good one. Bye.